Why do highly intelligent people willingly walk into obvious traps? In geopolitical conflict and high-stakes corporate warfare, a trap is rarely a hidden ambush. The most effective traps are set in plain sight. They are designed as a poisoned chalice, a concession, a promotion, or a territory so valuable that refusal is politically impossible, yet the structural liabilities attached to it are guaranteed to destroy you. The trap succeeds not because the victim is blind, but because the system denies them an exit. Over 50 years ago, Frank Herbert detailed this precise dynamic in Dune. Stripped of its science fiction aesthetic, the narrative serves as a practical study in Machiavellian power. The stability of the known universe rests on a single commodity: the spice. The logistics of interstellar travel, the processing power of space-skilled navigators, and the flow of the imperial banking system are completely dependent on its continuous extraction. To navigate the coordinates of space, guild pilots must consume the resource to unlock the mental calculations required for fold space travel. Without it, transport halts, commerce freezes, and the empire fractures into isolated star systems. The resource exists on only one planet, Arrakis, a harsh, arid desert. The house that controls Arrakis holds the ultimate leverage over all other noble houses, the banking cartel, and the space travel monopoly. The paranoid emperor sits at the head of this feudal system. His authority relies on keeping the vassal houses divided and weak. However, a challenger has emerged from within the aristocracy. The Honorable Duke is gaining rapid influence. His military forces are highly trained, and his reputation for integrity has won the respect of the other noble houses in the Landsraad Parliament. In a system built on shifting alliances, a popular leader who can unite the secondary houses represents an existential threat to the sovereign. The emperor cannot assassinate the duke directly. If the imperial crown is seen executing a popular vassal without cause, the remaining noble houses will form a defensive coalition to depose the monarch. The throne must achieve the destruction of the duke, while maintaining the illusion of absolute neutrality. The emperor utilizes the poison chalice strategy. He issues an imperial decree transferring the stewardship of the desert planet to the Honorable Duke. This requires the duke to leave his ancestral homeworld and relocate his entire administration, military, and family to Arrakis. On paper, this is a massive promotion. It places the most valuable asset in the universe in the duke's hands. It elevates his house to the highest tier of financial influence. In reality, the transfer is a coordinated trap. The desert planet was previously governed by the duke's blood rivals, led by the ruthless Baron. The Baron does not fight the imperial decree. He retreats, but before leaving, he sabotages the spice harvesting infrastructure. He removes the heavy mining machinery, hides the critical spare parts, and leaves behind deep cover agents within the local administration. He ensures the duke inherits an unworkable, failing economic structure. Furthermore, the emperor has negotiated a secret alliance with the ruthless Baron. The emperor will provide his personal elite military legions, undefeated shock troops, disguised in the Baron's colors, to launch a sudden, overwhelming assault once the duke's forces are scattered across the desert surface. The duke's resources will be stretched thin trying to meet spice production quotas, leaving his defenses compromised. The Honorable Duke sits in his study holding the wax-sealed imperial document. He has analyzed the logistics. He knows his military is too small to secure the desert planet against a coordinated assault. He knows the infrastructure is crippled. He knows the ruthless Baron is waiting. He looks at his son, the weaponized heir, who has been trained since birth in the logistics of warfare and political manipulation. They both understand the calculation. The rules of the feudal contract leave them no exit. If the duke refuses the emperor's assignment, he is guilty of treason. The other noble houses, bound by imperial treaty, will be forced to assist the emperor in his execution. He can go to Arrakis and face an engineered war, or he can stay and be hunted as a rebel. He lays the document on his desk and begins to draft the orders for relocation. The landing on Arrakis is a logistical nightmare. The Honorable Duke steps onto the heat-blasted surface of the desert planet. He is met not with the ready wealth of an empire, but with the decay of a systematically gutted operation. His chief economic advisors quickly report the scale of the damage. The water sellers exploit the local population, the palace cooling systems are failing, and the massive spice harvesting factories are crippled. The ruthless Baron's departing forces left behind rusted machinery, sabotaged carryalls, and depleted warehouses. Every day the Duke fails to meet the imperial spice production quota. His political standing in the capital degrades, the trap is closing, and his balance sheets are in the red. But the Honorable Duke did not walk into this trap blindly. He is a career military strategist who understands the arithmetic of power. He knew his private houseguard, while highly disciplined, was far too small to withstand the combined onslaught of the ruthless Baron's mercenaries and the paranoid Emperor's legions. In conventional warfare, his defeat is mathematically guaranteed. To survive, he must abandon conventional doctrine. He must pivot to asymmetric warfare, finding an unmapped lever of leverage on the desert planet that his enemies have completely overlooked. The Duke's intelligence network analyzes the planetary demographics. Imperial census reports claim the deep desert is uninhabited, save for a few thousand scattered nomads. The Duke's advisors discover this is a massive administrative error propagated by the Baron's lazy intelligence gathering. The deep desert is populated by millions of indigenous people, the desert fanatics. These people survive in an environment where water is the ultimate currency. They wear sophisticated filtration suits that recycle every drop of bodily moisture, allowing them to traverse the deep sands without dehydrating. The harshness of the planet has functioned as a brutal natural selection process. They are highly skilled guerrilla fighters, hardened by the deadliest terrain in the known universe. They fight with a religious zeal that the Baron's paid mercenaries can never match. The Duke recognizes the strategic equation. The spice is the distraction. The desert fanatics are the actual prize. If he can secure their trust and weaponize their numbers, he can build an army capable of matching the Emperor's elite legions. This is desert power. The Duke initiates his diplomatic campaign. His son, the weaponized heir, watches the strategy unfold. While the ruthless Baron had treated the local population as pests to be exploited and killed, the Duke offers a different transaction. He sends his most capable military advisors and diplomats into the deep desert, not to conquer, but to negotiate. He offers them water security, medical aid, and respect for their customs. He treats them as sovereign allies rather than colonial subjects. He seeks to convert their long-standing hatred of the foreign exploiters into a coordinated political and military alliance under his house. The weaponized heir notes the lesson. Respect is a highly efficient tool for securing loyalty. The strategy is elegant, but the Duke's calculation contains a single fatal flaw: the timeline. Building an alliance with an insular, deeply suspicious population requires time. The Duke calculated that the imperial bureaucracy and the Baron's logistical preparations would buy him months to establish his desert network. He was wrong. The Baron's moves are accelerated by desperation. He has spent his family's entire financial treasury to pay the Space Guild's exorbitant transport fees, bypassing the normal bureaucratic delays. The Emperor's transport ships are already in transit. The plan is not to wait for the Duke to fail. It is to strike before he can even begin to organize. In the middle of the night, the palace alarms scream. A series of massive explosions rips through the spaceport, incinerating the Duke's frigate fleet before the engines can even warm up. The houseguards scramble to their defensive positions, but when the officers try to activate the fortress shield wall, the controls are dead. The security perimeter has been deactivated from the inside. A trusted insider has cut the power lines. The sky fills with the landing lights of the invasion fleet. The attack has begun. The attack is an execution, not a battle. Without the shield wall, the fortress is exposed to orbital bombardment. Heavy artillery shatters the barracks. The invasion force pours into the breaches. Among the mercenaries are the paranoid Emperor's elite legions, wearing the colors of the ruthless Baron. They are religious warriors, trained in brutal environments, and they move with absolute efficiency. The Duke's troops, caught off guard and scattered, are systematically cornered and slaughtered in the palace corridors. In high-level security structures, the greatest vulnerability is always human, but the Honorable Duke's security protocols were considered highly secure. The traitor who deactivated the shields was his personal physician. To understand why this was unthinkable, one must understand imperial conditioning. The medical schools of the empire use deep, post-hypnotic psychological programming to construct a mental barrier within their graduates. This conditioning makes it physically impossible for them to take a human life or betray their patients. It is a biological lock. For centuries, these doctors have been the trusted confidants of emperors and dukes. They are considered the safest assets in the universe. So, how did the ruthless Baron break a system designed to be unbreakable? He did not use financial bribes. A conditioned mind cannot be purchased. He did not torture the doctor. The conditioning is designed to withstand physical duress. Instead, the Baron looked for the doctor's single, unconditioned attachment. He found the doctor's wife. The Baron kidnapped her. He subjected her to systematic physical and psychological torment. He sent the doctor proof of her suffering. Along with a simple transaction, the torment would stop, and she would be granted a quick death, only if the doctor delivered the honorable Duke. The Baron leveraged the only human force powerful enough to override deep psychological programming: love. Confronted with the ongoing agony of his wife, the doctor's mental conditioning collapsed under the pressure. This is a fundamental law of power. No security system is impenetrable, and no individual is entirely incorruptible. Every human asset has a pressure point, a specific vulnerability that bypasses logic, training, and conditioning. Often, this vulnerability is not a vice like greed or ambition. It is a virtue. It is the desire to protect a child, a spouse, or an ideal. If you can locate what a man values most, you hold the key to his absolute submission. The Baron did not attack the doctor's loyalty. He turned his love into a leverage point. The doctor paralyzes the Duke with a chemical dart, intending to trade him to the Baron, but the doctor is not entirely merciless. Before handing him over, he implants a fake tooth in the Duke's mouth, filled with concentrated poison gas. He tells the Duke to use it when he is close to the Baron. The Duke is bound and dragged into the palace dining room. The ruthless Baron sits at the head of the table, enjoying the spoils of the conquest. He looks at his defeated rival. The Duke, unable to move his limbs, bites down on the false tooth. He exhales a cloud of toxic gas across the table. The Baron's advisors collapse immediately, their lungs failing. The Duke dies in his chair. But the Baron is a cautious predator. At the first hiss of the gas, he activates his personal gravity suspensors and floats to the ceiling, away from the heavy, descending vapor. His body shield deflects the microscopic droplets. The gas clears. The Honorable Duke is dead, his house dismantled, and his army destroyed. The Baron descends back to the floor, coughing, but alive. The trap has been executed to the letter. In the smoking ruins of the fortress, two survivors slip past the patrolling mercenaries. The Honorable Duke's concubine and his son, the weaponized heir, flee into the trackless deep desert. Behind them is certain execution. Ahead of them is a scorched wasteland where temperatures exceed 50 degrees Celsius and giant carnivorous sand beasts roam the dunes. By all logical metrics, their death is imminent. But the weaponized heir possesses an invisible network of protection built long before his birth. To understand how a young man and his mother survived the deadliest environment in the universe, we must pause and analyze the most powerful political entity in the Imperium, the Shadow Sisterhood. This is a matriarchal order of spies, genetic engineers, and political advisors sitting behind the thrones of every major house. They do not seek overt military command. They understand that visible power is always a target. Instead, they operate as the gray eminences of the empire. For 10,000 years, they have run a secret breeding program, pairing specific noble lines to engineer a superior mind, a human computer capable of predicting future timelines. The weaponized heir's mother is a high-ranking member of this order, and she has secretly trained her son in their advanced mental and physical disciplines. But the Sisterhood's most efficient political tool is not genetic engineering, it is the manipulation of belief. Centuries ago, they established an offensive intelligence wing known as the Missionaria Protectiva. This department sent operatives to the most hostile primitive star systems, including the desert planet of Arrakis. These operatives did not travel to spread enlightenment or preserve peace. Their mission was to plant specific religious software into the cultural hardware of the local populations. They cultivated a structured folklore, sowing the seeds of a tailored religion. This is religion engineered as an insurance policy. The sisterhood seeded a specific messianic prophecy among the desert fanatics, the promise that one day an off-world prophet, accompanied by his noble mother, would arrive on Arrakis. This prophet would understand their secret languages, master the desert, and lead them to an ecological paradise where water flows freely. The sisterhood did not believe this prophecy. They wrote it. They engineered this cultural infrastructure so that if a member of their order was ever stranded or politically exiled on Arrakis, she could step into the pre-carved role of the prophet's mother. By reciting the correct phrases and demonstrating specific, pre-programmed signs, she could instantly hijack the local belief system, turning a hostile population of native killers into a personal security detail. The system is tested. Deep in the dunes, the weaponized heir and his mother are surrounded. A tribe of desert fanatics emerges from the rocks, their faces masked. In the deep desert, outsiders are treated as water reserves. The fanatics calculate the volume of moisture in the human body. They prepare to kill the survivors, drain their blood, and recycle their water into the tribe's collective cisterns. The blades of their poisoned knives slide from their sheaths. But the mother steps forward. She does not plead. She looks at the tribal leader and speaks. She uses the specific sacred terminology, the exact vocal frequencies and religious terminology planted by the Missionaria Protectiva generations ago. When the leader steps forward to strike, she uses the sisterhood's physical combat techniques, a style of movement that exploits human anatomy with terrifying speed. The desert fanatics halt. They lower their blades. They look at the mother and the weaponized heir, whispering the name of the predicted savior from their ancient texts. The cultural hack is activated. The refugees have just inherited an army. The weaponized heir and his mother are integrated into the deep desert community. They learn the survival mechanics of the tribe, the extraction of water from the dead, the navigation of the shifting sands, and the absolute discipline required to avoid detection. But survival is a baseline, not a goal. The heir did not escape the massacre of his house to live as a desert nomad. He has inherited his father's political ambition and his house's thirst for retaliation. To avenge the honorable duke, he must transform these scattered desert tribes from a defensive survival network into an offensive weapon. He must seize absolute control of the desert fanatics. He does not attempt to rule through military rank or aristocratic titles. His enemies have already stripped him of those. Instead, he utilizes the pre-installed religious infrastructure. He steps directly into the role of the predicted Messiah. He performs the engineered miracles written into their folklore. He decodes their secret rituals, demonstrates advanced combat mastery, and survives the consumption of their sacred toxic desert poison. His ultimate trial is the taming of the giant sandworm, the apex predator of the planet. By mounting and controlling the monstrous beast, he fulfills the most sacred rite of passage in their culture. To the desert fanatics, this is not a feat of animal husbandry. It is the physical manifestation of the divine. This is a cold, calculated conversion. The weaponized heir is a highly educated aristocrat, schooled in mathematics, logic, and statecraft. He knows he is not a god. He knows the prophecies were engineered in a boardroom by the Shadow Sisterhood centuries ago. But he also understands a fundamental truth of human organization. Rational arguments do not inspire men to charge into machine gun fire. Logic creates compliance. Only religious fervor creates self-sacrificing obedience. He deliberately allows the desert fanatics to view him as a deity. He plays the role of the Messiah because it is the only leverage point powerful enough to unite millions of scattered warriors into a single, cohesive military force. He trades his personal identity for an unstoppable political myth. Armed with an army of millions of fanatics who view his commands as divine law, the heir launches his campaign of asymmetric warfare. He does not commit his forces to conventional siege warfare against the Baron's fortified cities. That is where his enemies hold the technological advantage. Instead, he targets the economic engine of the empire. He strikes the spice harvesting infrastructure. His guerrilla squads descend from the deep desert, neutralizing the carryalls, destroying the mining crawlers, and melting back into the sands before orbital reinforcements can arrive. He targets the supply lines, the water reservoirs, and the processing plants. The results are immediate and highly destructive. Spice production plummets. The cost of interstellar transport skyrockets as the Space Guild runs low on reserves. The universal banking system begins to panic, and stock prices in the imperial capital plunge. The ruthless Baron is losing trillions of dollars daily. He tries to suppress the news, executing his advisors and forcing his workers to mine under impossible conditions, but the economic hemorrhage cannot be concealed. The Baron's leverage is evaporating, and his debt to the Space Guild is compounding. The economic destabilization reaches the throne. The paranoid emperor realizes that this is not a minor tribal riot. It is a threat to the foundation of his reign. Furious at the Baron's incompetence, the emperor takes direct command. He mobilizes the royal armada. He packs his entire court, his military commanders, and his elite legions into massive transport ships. The royal fleet descends on Arrakis, darkening the desert sky. The paranoid emperor arrives to personally crush this local uprising. The chessboard is set for the final clash. The paranoid emperor establishes his command center in a natural rock basin, protected by a massive mobile metal fortress and high-power electronic energy shields. He believes his technological superiority guarantees his victory. But the weaponized heir does not fight on the emperor's terms. He monitors the weather patterns. He waits for a massive desert storm, a tempest with winds exceeding 400 kilometers per hour, carrying static electrical charges that short-circuit and deactivate the electronic shield generators of the Imperial fortress. The shields drop. Before the Imperial commanders can recalibrate their generators, the storm hits. Out of the blinding dust, the desert fanatics launch their assault. They do not charge on foot. They ride the giant sandworms directly through the collapsed defensive perimeter, crushing the armored divisions under the sheer physical mass of the beasts. The battle is brief and decisive. The Emperor's elite legions, caught in a blind dust storm and facing a force that fights with religious disregard for death, are systematically overrun. The Imperial command center is breached. The paranoid Emperor and the ruthless Baron are dragged from their safe rooms. They are brought before the weaponized heir, who sits on the stone throne of the Arrakis residency. The ruthless Baron is executed on the spot, his body dragged from the chamber. The Emperor stands alone, his royal guards dead on the pavement outside. Even in captivity, the paranoid Emperor attempts to assert his authority. He reminds the heir of the imperial hierarchy. He commands the fleets of 100 noble houses currently orbiting the planet. He threatens to issue an executive order to the Landsraad Parliament, directing the combined military weight of the entire universe to glass the planet from orbit, turning the desert into a sheet of sterile green glass. He believes this is his ultimate leverage. The heir does not debate military tactics or count orbital ships. He has already bypassed that level of conflict. He reveals his final calculation. He has placed concentrated water bombs across the subterranean spice beds of Arrakis. The chemical interaction between pure water and the pre-spice mass triggers a catastrophic chain reaction. If he detonates these charges, the ecological cycle of the planet will be permanently disrupted. The sandworms will die, and the production of spice will cease forever. If the spice dies, interstellar travel halts. The navigators will go blind. The transport fleets will remain permanently stranded in orbit. The financial cartel will collapse, and the Empire will disintegrate into isolated star systems. The representatives of the Space Guild, listening to the transmission, immediately order the orbiting noble fleets to stand down. They cannot risk their monopoly. This is the defining moment of political science in the narrative. The heir looks at the Emperor and utters the defining law of resource hegemony. He who can destroy a thing controls a thing. Absolute power does not belong to the entity that currently owns the resource, nor does it belong to the consumer who buys it. It belongs to the individual who has the capability and the absolute willingness to burn it to the ground. By holding the survival of the entire universal economy hostage, the heir bypasses the military strength of every noble house in the galaxy. He has achieved total asymmetric leverage. The paranoid Emperor looks into the cold, dead eyes of the weaponized heir. He looks for a sign of hesitation, a crack in the resolve of the young man standing before him. He finds none. He realizes the heir is a product of the Shadow Sisterhood's breeding program, trained in absolute pragmatic calculation. It is not a bluff. If the crown is not surrendered, the universe goes dark. The Emperor of the known universe bows his head. He places his crown on the stone floor at the feet of the heir. The checkmate is complete. The weaponized heir stands on the balcony of the imperial palace. Below him, millions of desert fanatics chant his name. He has achieved what was thought impossible. He survived the design trap of the paranoid emperor, systematically dismantled the ruthless baron's house, avenged the honorable duke, and seized the throne of the known universe. Yet, as he looks out over the cheering legions, there is no sense of triumph. He looks at their faces, and his computational mind calculates the future timelines. By weaponizing religious fanaticism to build his army, the heir has constructed an unstoppable socio-political machine. The religious fervor he cultivated cannot be turned off with an imperial decree. The desert fanatics will not be content with securing Arrakis. They view their victory as a divine mandate to purge the galaxy. They will pack into the transport ships, carrying his banner to 1,000 star systems, launching a highly destructive galactic holy war in his name. Billions will die in the sweeps across the galaxy. The heir has escaped the Emperor's physical cage, only to lock himself in a psychological one. He is no longer a free agent. He is a prisoner of the very myth he used to survive. The rise and consolidation of the weaponized heir provides 3 distinct rules for navigating high-stakes power dynamics. First, understand the poison chalice. In corporate, social, and geopolitical structures, a sudden advancement is rarely a pure benefit. A poison chalice always looks like a victory. Your peers will congratulate you, and your superiors will praise your readiness. The telltale sign is the isolation. They are moving you away from your power base. When a superior hands you a new project, a promotion, or a troubled department, you must analyze the structural liabilities. Often, it is a calculation designed to drain your resources and set you up for a highly public failure. If you must accept the gift, do not rely on the existing infrastructure. Like the Duke, you must immediately seek unmapped levers of power. Second, recognize the leverage of cultural hacking. The most efficient control mechanism is never physical force. Armies are expensive, noisy, and invite resistance. True control is achieved through narrative. The Shadow Sisterhood did not build their myth in a day. They mapped the psychological geography of Arrakis. In your own organization, do not try to install completely new values. Identify the existing folklore, the founders' myths, the institutional history, the underlying anxieties, and frame your initiative as the inevitable fulfillment of those values. If you can align your objectives with the pre-existing assumptions of a group, they will execute your strategy while believing they are acting on their own free will. Third, calculate the cost of extreme leverage. Constructing absolute leverage, such as threatening to destroy the system if your demands are not met, is highly effective for seizing power. It bypasses conventional defenses, but it forces you to rule through constant existential terror. Once you demonstrate the willingness to burn the system down, you can never show weakness. You are bound to the weapon you created. The weaponized heir won the galaxy, but he spent the rest of his life managing the fanaticism he unleashed. Before you use the nuclear option in a negotiation, ensure you are prepared to live in the fallout. When you choose to ride the tiger, you must accept that you can never dismount. The imperial courts will change their allegiances. The sandstorms of Arrakis will continue to shift, and the spice must flow. But whether in the modern boardroom or the deep desert of a distant star system, the core mechanics of leverage, trap setting, and human manipulation remain completely unchanged. Thank you for analyzing these structures of power with us. Watch your perimeters, calculate your timelines, and we will see you in the next study of leverage.